Okay, so we're ready. Welcome to Markers and Milestones, where we explore educational opportunities for young men and women beyond traditional college, all from a Christ-centered perspective. I'm Lee Bortons. I'm here with my co-host, Amanda Kleist. Today's June 12th, 2023, and we're joined by Matthew Weathers from Biola University in California. I'm so excited that we have him on. He's one of the most interesting men I've had the opportunity to share lunch with, and I'm so glad to catch up with you. Thanks for joining us, Matthew.
Nice to see you again, Lee and Amanda.
So
Happy to be here.
Amanda's going to introduce you, Matthew, and start the conversation.
Well, Matthew Weathers is one of our favorite people in our house because we get the pleasure of spending lots of time with him because he lives in the household that we live in, but also because we go to church with him. So Matthew's one of my favorite people too, and I agree with Lee that he's very interesting. So Matthew, we're glad you're here today. And one of the first questions I have for you is, how did you get started doing YouTube?
Well, every YouTuber has an origin story, and it's kind of like the thing to do to leave up your first video ever, no matter how good or bad it is. And in this case, it was 2006, and they were building a new dorm at Biola University, and I got to go on a little tour. So I took a video camera, and made a little, video tour of this brand new dorm that some of my students would be moving into. And I thought to myself, how can I share it with them? And then somebody said, oh, there's this new thing called YouTube, and you can just put it there for free. So yeah, I was just looking for a place to post a video about the new Horton dorm at Biola University. If anybody wants to go look at that video, there it is. And
So
then
that was your very first, 2006, you said.
right, and then I did these sort of prank videos on my math class and used the same place to post, post those for my students to look at.
So I went online to look at your newest videos, and do you have a new YouTube channel? Because your older one has just older videos. What's been going on with
Yeah,
that?
I haven't been teaching that specific math class in a little bit, so I haven't posted any new things, and I've been experimenting with a few other things here and there.
So why don't you tell us what you mean by the math class in the video? Who are you, Matthew? What do you do
Sure.
for a living?
Yeah, so I work full-time at Biola in the Office of Digital Learning, and our team puts classes online for online classes. I work specifically with the Canvas learning management system. That's kind of like my real job. I tell people I work to support my teaching habit, and then I teach part-time, and I've taught this math class for a couple years, and then the past couple semesters I've been teaching a different version of that, and then an intro to computer science class. So technically, I'm an adjunct professor, and this math class that you're referring to was a general ed math class for humanities majors that I taught to probably a significant portion of the graduates from Biola University who are humanities majors for a number of years.
I don't know, Amanda, if you can brag on Matthew, or we'll let him do it himself. But my understanding is here you are a math professor offering to humanities students, and yet you get a waiting list because your class is so popular. Like, just explain, what is it you do, and why are your students so happy to be with you?
I think that if you want students to pay attention, it should be interesting. So I try to tell the story of mathematics. I try to talk about the interesting parts of what mathematics is, and they're stuck in there anyway because they have to have some kind of math credit. But I tell them, the invention of the zero wasn't automatic. I tell them about how theology and philosophy are relevant. The fact that we can talk about different levels of infinity is interesting, or even how philosophy and theology and free will and God's providence and probability all fit together. It's helpful to know some probability if you want to understand certain apologetics types arguments for the existence of God. So I try to weave in all of these different stories into that class to make it interesting and fun.
So Matthew, math has a story, infinity has levels, philosophers and theology is important. Thinking about those 18 to 24-year-olds, because you've been interacting since your hair wasn't the same color that it is now with them, what are three things that you think they should hear no matter what they're doing, whether they're in college, whether they're in the trade, whether they're going into the military, whether they're taking a gap year, spending a year on the mission field? What are 3 things you think would help them?
I guess I'll start with the idea that education is not specifically about school. There's a correlation between education and school, obviously. But it's kind of this whole multifaceted thing. A good education might need a good curriculum, good content, a good teacher, a willing student, an able student. And if you have the right combination, all those can come together in different ways. There's a plethora of content out there, even just on YouTube, for example. You could probably get an equivalent of a college education or the content equivalent of a college education is on YouTube. But that's just content. Content by itself isn't curriculum. Curriculum is somebody saying, hey, let's do these specific things in this order. But then curriculum isn't an education either. You need a teacher. And then a teacher by itself, a teacher and a good curriculum is not enough. You need a willing student. I think that if you have a good teacher, you can overcome a lot of the other deficits. And same with a good student, you could overcome the deficits. Like, Matt Damon said in Good Will Hunting, he got the same education as this Harvard guy with $1.50 in library fines, right? If you have the right, but a library or YouTube just provides content. If you have a willing student and a student who's willing to make their own curriculum, that might be enough. But ideally, have a good mix of all those things. So, yeah, I would say that's one thing I would want students to know, is that education does not equal school, does not equal curriculum, does not equal having a good teacher. If you have a bad teacher, that's unfortunate, and you might have to work harder, but still, yeah, maybe I could make that into my second point. I'm trying to make 3. Your second is that your education is up to you. You are the, take initiative, be proactive. So yeah, I guess number 2 would be proactivity. And then third, I'd say look for the overarching story in things. I try to tell the story and show how God influences the discovery of mathematics, the discovery of science, the discovery of all kinds of truth. All truth is God's truth. So I would say maybe that'd be the third thing, is look for the big picture story. Ideally, that's understanding God's place and purpose for your life and your place in it, and being really thoughtful about how you fit into what God wants you to be doing at that moment.
I think those 3 things will resonate really well with our audience, Matthew. What's difficult for folks that aren't involved in the intentionality of education like homeschoolers are, is even knowing what you just said. Right. But to me, it was very clear what you were talking about. So I don't know if you want to unpack, you unpacked the first point a whole lot. On the second one, I want to share a quick story and give you some time to think. I was not a good student when I entered University of Michigan Engineering College. I'd gone from being, the big fish in a small pond to now a very small fish in a massive pond of engineering students. And it wasn't until I really learned the difference between learning to teach myself and just trying to get the answer at the back of the book. And the benefit I got from that was there was a teacher that was not considered a good teacher. Nobody liked her. They were all happy to get a C from her. It just happened to be, though, when I was emotionally really learning to learn. So look, I'm talking 20. So if you have a 15, 16-year-old and you're not having a kid that loves learning, it's okay. It might come later.
Mm-hmm.
But I fell in love with this teacher because she challenged me. She didn't hold my hand. And for whatever reason, it was working. And because I went out of my way to go to her to her office hours, I went out of the way to make sure I asked her a lot of questions. I sat in the front seat. I made friends with her. By the time we were done, I still just got a C in the class. I still wasn't that great of a student, but she made sure I was on a PBS special. She made sure I was on Women in Science. She made sure I interacted with various professional organizations I never would have had ever even known existed if it wasn't for that, the intentionality on my part in forming that relationship, which you talked about earlier. She was a good teacher, just not your good standard classroom teacher, maybe is the way to talk about it. So for that second one, the students taking initiative, what is it that you see in students?
Yeah, so taking initiative is important, and I think that students hopefully could find something that they're interested in. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be interested in everything, or that you have to be interested in mathematics, or you have to be interested in science. And so trying to find something that you're interested in would be an important part. And then also, there is, now I'm not saying that you should just follow your passions, because if that's bad advice too, just merely like, oh, go do whatever you're passionate about. But there's part of that, but then also what you said is that you went out of your way, and it is going to take some of going out of your way or doing something that might not be 100% comfortable. So learning to do things that feel uncomfortable is a valuable skill. Learning to do things that are towards things that you like, that you are interested in, would be a good way to overcome that. Because if you're trying to do something that you're not interested in and it's hard to do, man, for a teenager or even early 20s, that's pretty hard. That's pretty a hard sell, right? So part of it is just practice, I guess. Just in general, trying to be a person of initiative and proactivity comes from practice, comes from a little bit of delayed gratification, comes from, putting down your phone sometimes. So I guess I would suggest make it easy on yourself by finding things where you can take initiative that you're interested in, and then see where that leads you from there, and be comfortable with a little bit of
Discomfort.
Be okay with some discomfort. I was about to say be comfortable with some discomfort, but that's kind of but you know what I mean.
Right.
So I want to pick up on this point about take initiative, because I don't know that everybody understands the word initiative. I think that some of us think, well, somebody's going to pass that plate of cookies to me. The initiative is to take the cookie off the plate. And what I think we're actually talking about here, and if you guys are talking about something different, help me see it, is you actually are saying, I think I want cookies. I'm going to find somebody that has cookies, and I'm going to go meet them and acknowledge who they are and see if I can start a conversation with them, and then moving on from there. I think that's the kind of initiative we're talking about. Am I right?
That's a good point. There are definitely different levels of initiative, like baking the cookies yourself, or saying pass the cookies, or grabbing the plate of cookies, or taking one as it comes by as it comes by you. And maybe I would say, if you feel like speaking to people who feel like they don't have much initiative, maybe you can start with the baby steps first, like learn to start taking the cookie off the plate. And then after that, maybe learn to actually express that and say, hey, could you please pass the plate of cookies? And maybe later, like, go get the recipe and cook them yourself. I think that going from 0 to 1 is a big step, much more than going from like 3 to 4 or 7 to 8 or something like that. So if you feel like you're a person with zero initiative, maybe don't like jump straight into baking cookies yourself. I'm using this analogy because
Sure.
it's
Yeah,
interesting
feel free to
analogy.
change it, but yeah.
Yeah, I like that. I like that analogy. Practice with the easier things first, because in general, learning happens right at the limb of where you feel competent. You feel competent to do something, whether it's math or whether it's learning how to take initiative or reading Shakespeare or something. If this is where you're at, try to like push yourself just a little bit farther than that. If you try too much, you'll just get discouraged. If it's too easy, you won't ever grow. So I would say push yourself a little bit,
Mhm.
even if it's just a baby step, even if it's just going from 0 to 1, that's okay.
Yes, because how many years have you been working with children of this age? Are you in
I started my first class in 1998, so
a long time?
oh well, yeah.
Yeah. So what are your greatest joys as a teacher?
I love it when people see the when they see the thing that makes sense to them, where something clicks, where I can explain something in a way that makes sense to them and they understand. And so whether that's explaining a mathematics concept, or at the end of last semester, my computer science students made a simple little video game, and just watching them come alive because they said, "Oh, this thing that I wanted to do, I figured out how to do it, and here's my game," and they feel so proud of what they created. So that that's really rewarding to kind of see how that works. I have an example here. I sometimes start my math class with this little diagram, and I say, okay, here's a rectangle. You know, this is 4, this is 6. What percent of the rectangle is below this line? Let's say it's a rubber band that you kind of move back and forth. How much of it is below the line? And mathematics taught badly is if you're just sitting there trying to memorize a bunch of formulas and you know, repeat things by rote. Mathematics taught well teaches students that math is actually about thinking clearly. And computer science too, it's about thinking clearly in a very specific way to write computer programs. And so I say, look at this, and I take a line and draw a red line in between, and I draw that red line, and now it becomes clear that this rectangle is exactly split in half, and this rectangle is exactly split in half. So the answer is 50%. It doesn't matter what these numbers are up there. And so that's what I love doing, is drawing these red lines, so to speak. If I can show them, hey, here's one little fact, or here's one little piece that helps you put things together and think at a higher level, that's rewarding. So my whole life is trying to draw red lines for people, so to speak.
Well, one of the things I see when you just did that, not ever having taken your class, just of having had conversations with you, is that you are wanting people not only just to grind through a process, you're wanting them to open and use all their capacity, or most of their capacity, or more than they did last week of their capacity, to think the new thought. And to think about that a little bit differently, and to approach it from a different angle. So that's partly also initiative, to say the way I did it before might not be the way I have to do it again. Let me see what else I can do with this piece, extending yourself a little bit. So Matthew, you are somebody who grew up before you came to college, right? So give us a little bit of that story.
I don't know how much of growing up I had finished by the time I made it to college, but I understand the intent of your question. Yeah, so my parents work for Wycliffe Bible Translators. They retired 4 or 5 years ago. For my whole life growing up, they were with Wycliffe, and we lived in Mexico for a number of years, probably totaling 7 years or so of me growing up. And so I've spent some time living down there. But then I went to high school in Tucson, Arizona, and moved to Southern California to go to Biola University, and then went to USC eventually. And then about 5 years after I graduated from college, I started working at Biola. So my time before undergrad was working. It was living in Tucson and Mexico and a couple other places. And so I've experienced a little bit of home education, so to speak, in my early years. But then I also went to a public high school in high school. So I did spend one year in Tucson in 8th grade. I went to a small Christian school. So I've experienced a couple
Variety.
situations. Yeah.
So, Matthew, when you came to college, how did you set yourself up with your church? What was that experience like for you, having this varied background?
When I first started, I looked around at different churches for a while. Part of what informed my decision was that I liked being close to church because I didn't have a car and just looking for rides or who was going to which church. And so I ended up at a church about a mile away from campus. And then I think that I didn't really feel plugged in until I started volunteering as a high school core group leader, which I did for about 6 years, which is a really high energy type of volunteer situation. I probably had enough energy for the first 5 years. And then, yeah, so I would say it was the combination of uh, proximity and becoming involved in a church. And so I guess I would recommend the same thing to students who are going away from home to college, that they also maybe it's okay to spend a little bit of time looking around, but at some point get plugged into the local church because that's where discipleship happens and where growth can happen.
Good. Good. So now that we know a little about you and your background, I wanted to ask you one, just kind of a tip and trick that's on one of your videos I really enjoyed was how to get cheap airplane tickets. And if you could tell that to us, the reason why is a segue to what we asked you to talk about tonight. Just for folks not to be afraid of new technologies and some of the things that are happening in the world. So tell us your fun tips about buying airplane tickets.
Sure. So first of all, the broader picture is that I like thinking about how mathematics can help us in our real lives and influence what we think about different things. And that's just a small example. It turns out that airlines, the budget airlines, want to save as much money as possible, but the federal government charges a tax on airfare. But if they can characterize some of the airfare as a optional fee, then they don't have to pay tax on that portion. So, for example, recently I bought a ticket that was listed for about 190, but 40 of that was two $20 fees for buying online. Now, so that means it doesn't matter to me, right? $190. If I pay it to the airline and they give me a flight, okay, we're fine. But because they characterize $40 of that as a optional online convenience fee, then they don't have to pay the federal government, I don't know, something like 12 cents or 30, whatever the percentage is, like a tiny little amount, which adds up over thousands of tickets. But you can take advantage of that because technically that's optional. And so the way to not pay that $40 fee is to walk up to a ticket counter. Imagine buying a ticket at a ticket counter, right? That's why they're called ticket counters, and buy it at the airport. That was a long answer. The short answer is if you buy tickets from airlines like Frontier, Spirit, and Allegiant at the ticket counter, you may be able to pay to save up to $25 each way, which is a significant portion of a $40 fare.
I also found out from your video that you don't have to buy just that one ticket. You can buy a bunch in advance if you know you're actually traveling and get even additional savings.
Right. You don't have to buy. The ticket counter sells all the tickets, not just the ones for that day at the airport.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I bought, those of you who are in Southern California, I happened to be in Orange County, so I bought my ticket at John Wayne Airport for a flight that I'm doing out of LAX later this summer. It wasn't even.
So you don't even have to go. So you don't even have to go to the source of the origination.
No.
You just have to be at a ticket counter.
Yeah, so I hang out at airports all the time, and I don't even think to go, oh, maybe I should go buy my next ticket while I'm here.
Yeah, for major airlines, it's not going to make a difference because they don't play that little game. But if you happen to be on like one of the budget airlines, it might.
Make a difference. And so I just use it as an illustration that's common to people. Most folks fly. But one of the first conversations you and I ever had about technology was your interest in the SHA-256 and Bitcoin. Can you catch up our audience with your interest in digital currencies and what you think is going on, and start talking about just what is going on? Because my concern is, and I know Amanda has the same concern, that parents aren't even aware of new financial structures. They're not aware of the new laws coming down, that they wouldn't even know to maybe tell their children, why don't you look at new technologies that are happening, except for AI, because everyone wants it legislated. But everything else, they don't seem to know what's going on. So why don't you let us know about your interest in cryptocurrency?
Sure. My main interest is in how mathematics can do interesting things with cryptography and blockchain type of digital currencies that use blockchain. And so I made a couple of videos that explain the mathematics behind it, which I think is the interesting thing. But to answer the bigger question about whether this is something big or not, I typically say, well, hey, it's not very often that we have a different way to do accounting. So when before writing, you just had to remember how much you owe to somebody. But as soon as you could write things down, now we had single entry accounting. And then that was, with the invention of writing. And even Jesus in Luke 19 tells the story of the shrewd manager who goes around and changes everybody's accounts, right? So that's one of the problems with single entry accounting. Double entry accounting, circa the 1400s with the Medici family, debits and credits, and you have you can balance and do audits and all that kind of thing. And that's what we still use. But within the past decade or two, we now have something called triple entry accounting, which is like double entry accounting, except that you can put a cryptographic signature or stamp of approval and sort of a continuous audit on it. Now the details, I think the details are interesting, but the details are very mathematical and cryptography type things. So it does seem like that we're coming into an era where there's a possibility of doing a different type of accounting called triple entry accounting that can be a lot more secure and not susceptible to government control as much, and not susceptible to fraud as much. Now, the details are all super important and all that kind of thing. And I like to draw an analogy between the development of new digital currencies and triple entry accounting to the development of the internet back in the late 90s. Everybody said, hey, there's this new thing coming. The internet's going to be great. It's going to be amazing. You're going to be able to do all this type of stuff. It's going to change everything. And it kind of did. Lots of things are different, but lots of things are the same. So I would liken it to the way that we communicate and how we find our ways around with navigation and read news, that kind of thing. A lot has changed since 1995, and it's due to the internet, but in sort of surprising and unexpected ways. And so the same thing I think is going to be true with triple entry accounting. Is it Bitcoin? Is Bitcoin the big thing? And should I dash off and try to make a bunch of money and get rich quick there? Well, I mean, if you go back to 1995 and people say, oh, is Netscape the big thing, or Amazon.com or Excite.com? Well, the right answer was Amazon.com, but you didn't know that back then, So what's happening is a shift in the way that store of value and exchange of value is now becoming possible, and whether and how that's going to change society in fundamental ways remains to be seen. And you could probably ask the same question about the internet in the past 30 years.
So for students interested in this idea of the triple entry accounting, is there a way you would suggest you go about learning about it? And are universities starting to offer degrees, or would you just say, fundamentally study math and you'll know whatever comes down the pipe?
Yeah, I guess I would say study mathematics, but also business and accounting and that kind of thing. And then because this is so new, one of the best sources of information would be just to find content on YouTube or find content online. Now, like I was saying earlier, I think there's plenty of content on YouTube. The bigger question would be, okay, has anybody put together a curriculum of what videos would be interesting and helpful to watch? And I'm not really aware of any. So at this point, it's a little bit like self-study. You kind of have to look around, see what's interesting, try to learn what you can. It could be that there are, some of these places have courses, like these online learning platforms have courses, and I know they have some about cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin specifically. Those might be helpful depending on.
But is Biola doing anything specifically in that realm?
Well, in my class I talk about it when it comes up. I mean, but yeah, when you learn accounting, when you learn mathematics in my class, it gets mentioned. So yeah, it's there.
So I have a question. You just sent us to YouTube, which has a plethora of various qualities. What questions do you ask yourself when viewing a YouTube video where you don't already know, like you haven't, this isn't somebody you already know you like, whatever. How do you ask questions to yourself about making it to see if it's a quality YouTube video?
Yeah, that's a hard thing because, like I said, YouTube has content but not curriculum. The curriculum ends up being if you just do the default thing of following the algorithm, it shows you what types of things will keep you on the platform long enough to see more ads. And so that's not a very good metric for me wanting to learn something, but it's great for YouTube wanting to show me ads. So in a sense, it goes back to the idea of being proactive. You need to be proactive in finding content, and like you said, asking yourself the questions about, does this look reputable? Are there, generally, if they have a bigger following, that's at least a indicator that's probably not on the super fringe. Like there are some super fringe things that have big followings, but that's another metric. But in general, I guess I would say find other websites or other courses or other recommendations from people, because there are lots of places where you can find recommendations for what types of YouTube things to watch. And in general, by the way, I think that it's really important to separate the discovery of information from the consumption of information. So as you're watching through or browsing the web or looking at articles or whatever, there's all kinds of things that might pique your interest, but you don't have time right then to watch a 20-minute video. But if you find something that you think would actually be really helpful to you, grab that 20-minute video and put it somewhere. You can use the YouTube watch list or just keep a list or something. So when you discover information is not necessarily the right time to watch it. And then vice versa, when you're ready to watch something, maybe you don't know what you want to watch, but then go look at your list, and then you can separate the discovery from the consumption. And I think that may be a way to end up finding higher quality content. In general, though, we just have to curate these sources of where we find things. Find content not just by mindlessly following the algorithms, but be proactive and tell yourself, okay, I want to learn how to change the faucet in a bathroom or something like that. If there's something specific you want to learn, I want to learn how to conjugate Spanish verbs, this verb or something. So actually actively searching is a way of being proactive versus just reactive, whatever happens across your feed.
Yeah. So I don't know if you know this, but you were part of our book club in February. So did anybody tell you about that? Yeah. So what happened is we spent 5 weeks reading Thank God for Bitcoin, about 40 of us. as well as we invited the author of the one of the authors of Thank God for Bitcoin, and one of the owners of Bitcoin Magazine. And we would watch your videos and then comment on it, as well as comment on the books. And people really liked them. They watched them over and over again.
Oh, that's
So,
good to hear. Yeah,
yes.
I have one in the works. I want to make one about how Bitcoin wallets work, like how, memorizing that 24 word phrase, how does that constitute a wallet? So
That would be a good one.
I should have finished it before you had your book club. That would have been
Oh, this is never going to end. There's always information to curate, like you said. Like, so for our parents, let's just define again. Curriculum is the course. It's from Latin. It means the course you run. So I kind of, as an analogy, say, right, well, so if you're running down the street, that's your curriculum, but which street and what's on it, that's your content that you're going alongside of. Does that work for you both? You're nodding.
Yeah, I got it.
Yeah, so we live in an era like back in the if you read about Abraham Lincoln, he barely had any books at all, and he just studied what he had. Whereas we're at the opposite end of the scale, where we have too many books, right? The libraries are too big. You never could read even what's in your local public library. The internet is too big. There's too many, how many, a couple hours of video are uploaded every minute. So there's no way any single person could ever watch everything on YouTube. But yeah, so that's why it's becoming more and more important to find good curriculum that helps us curate and leads us in the direction of what content to watch.
So when you said too many, did you mean it?
Too many what?
You said there's too many books and too many videos.
Let me say too many books for each individual person, for a person. How about that?
Yeah, I think there's too many just in general myself, because we were a much more literate nation or just cultures throughout any time of eras of literacy, when there were fewer things to read because we all read the same things. So then we could talk about it with somebody. Right. And so there was this common core knowledge that we had. On the other hand, I'm a voracious reader, so they probably can't write enough books for me.
Well, and that's going to be interesting. What happens in the near future, the question will be, what type of author would you be willing to read? Would you want to read just human authors, or if there are AIs that are catered to making something that's specifically just like the type of thing you want to read? If you love a certain type of novel, would you be okay reading a novel that was written by an AI?
The AI fan fiction motif.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know how that's going to work out, but it's going to be an interesting decade, I think.
So for people that don't know what you just said, explain what you mean.
All books throughout all of history until now have been written by human authors, or collections of authors or whatever. But it is now, in the past year or two, becoming more and more feasible for artificial intelligence using language models to create sentences, paragraphs, and now even longer form essays or short stories, or even a human author could help one of those AIs put together an entire book. In fact, I think there are already some for sale on Amazon, because you can self-publish on Amazon. So all that to say that it is now possible to read things that were written by a language model or a computer.
So as a teacher, what is bothering you about that, and what's exciting you about that?
I'm not super bothered. I guess if you're trying to assess how well somebody writes, it's always a problematic if somebody is not actually writing. So if they're copying what somebody else wrote, which was the way to plagiarize, 5 years ago, that's problematic. Or if they're not citing their sources, that's problematic in a different way. Or if they're, there's different ways. So as a teacher, if people are not writing when I'm telling them to write as a way of assessing something in the classroom, that's problematic. And and this is another tool, and maybe even a much easier tool to plagiarize than has existed before. as far as
So how
what's
are you gonna know how are you gonna know the difference? Is there a tool that you're buying, an app you're using?
I throw up my
But
hands and say I teach mathematics and computer science. So uh I'll see, I'll let Amanda's husband figure it out because he teaches literature.
what's he
So
saying, Amanda? Or should we let him speak for himself and have him
We should
on?
let him speak for
yeah,
himself, but there are things that you can buy that you can
Mhm.
subscribe to, just like professors have had turnitin.com or things like that that can check for the plagiarism we're familiar with. There are tools that are available to start checking, is this artificial intelligence generated? Their effectiveness, how good they are, what they cost, no idea about any of that. But yes, the market is being created. There is a supply and there is a demand happening.
and
So
then as
Matthew,
far,
okay.
oh, I was going to answer the second half about what I find as exciting, but is that what
Go
you were
ahead.
going to ask?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So what I find exciting about it is that it frees up the human author to concentrate on the bigger things, ideally. Um, and I'll use an analogy. My grandmother wrote an essay, and she had to write out the essay by hand and like make sure the spacing was right, and in order to just meet the minimum of what a good essay looks like, even before she even thought about the content. In fact, um, I have a copy of that essay, of an essay she wrote in college 100 years ago. But now, with the advent of laser printers and word processing software, then I can write an essay where I don't even have to think hardly at all about the font pace, or the spacing or the pagination, or what it looks like on the page, because the software does it all for me, and that frees me up to pay more attention to the content. And so it could be, and again, this is sort of what I'm excited about, the possibility. It could be that authors have more freedom to kind of experiment with the bigger picture ideas of character development, of scenes, of like experimenting with different kinds of writing in a way that makes them faster at creating content than if they had to write every sentence themselves. In the same, at the same time, I mean, I don't want to jump. I don't want to be like Dr. Pangloss and everything is great about that. But it could free up people to talk about bigger picture things. And the same thing is already happening. I have a friend who is a computer programmer, and he's already using Chat GTP and some of these other things to work on coding tasks. So he can write code faster because he already knows how to do the other uh, things, the easy things. It's just that this tool helps him do it faster, and he can concentrate on the bigger picture and do things faster. So that's not much of an answer, but wait and see is probably the best way to put all that.
So
Thanks.
Matthew, oh, go ahead, Lee.
No, so we're nearing the end of our time. So Amanda, you always have good questions to end with.
Well, Matthew, I guess my last question is, as a Christian, what is the top thing you think Christians should be doing in relationship to technology?
I guess that it would be the same thing uh, that we would say about Christianity in general, that finding what our purpose is in God's kingdom is important, and loving God is the number one command. And so in whatever ways you can love God better, um, advance His kingdom, help other people love God. Um, if you want to use if there are ways to do that technologically, then take advantage of that. So I guess I would say that technology is just a piece of the puzzle in the bigger picture, and there are ways to do that. And historically, we've seen that all over the place, right? When radio came about, some of the first radio stations or some of the first users of radio were preachers who could preach God's word to a wide variety of people. Out in the middle of the rural America didn't have access to much preaching, and now they have access to preaching. Same thing with a TV. Maybe you have access. I could watch 10 sermons on a Sunday if I want to, whereas I probably couldn't drive around to 10 different churches and see them. So use technology to love God better, to further the reach of the gospel. Even writing was a technology, right? So is God himself, in his providence, arranged that his word would be written down using the technology of pen and ink. Some of it was oral history before, but in the long run, we now have written books. There were scrolls back then and books now. So yeah, I wouldn't say that technology is inherently good or evil, but maybe configurations of technology could be problematic, like the configuration of putting a cell phone in a teenager's hand with TikTok on it, that the system is inherently such that it rewards like lower attention span and I don't know, chasing after certain images or ideas. So I think that you could make an argument that certain configurations of technology are problematic, but not technology itself.
That's interesting. When I was growing up, my mom would not let my siblings or I watch Sesame Street, and that was a big deal. I'm old enough that cartoons and things like that had just started being launched. And she was like, there is no way I will ever let you guys be trained to think in 15-second blocks. And so that she had that kind of wisdom. How old am I now? 57 years ago.
Yeah, I wish that somebody at Facebook 10 years ago had said, is there a way that we can change things on Facebook such that people grow together, grow closer together, they put more encouraging content out there, they have more connectedness, that kind of, because I can imagine a world where technology was specifically meant to help that kind of thing. And now, even despite the fact that the whole orientation of Facebook is to generate more ad revenue, there's enough of a draw to people want to get together, they want to connect with each other. But we still use Facebook even in its like shriveled state of what it is now. For this lunch group I go to some Sundays after church, for the small group at my church, we still use it. But just imagine that if it had actually been actively designed to encourage human flourishing and connection. If I were king of the world, it's a good thing I'm not king of the world, by the way, but if I were king of the world, that's what would have happened. Who knows how successful it would have been, though.
Well, that ends us on a good topic, though, for our good point is to look at whatever the technology is, right? Whether it's electricity and radios and automobiles, or it's AI and cryptocurrency, is what about it helps us flourish as human beings versus what of it just only contributes to what C.S. Lewis called that hideous strength, where the power of a man over many men becomes perverted. So human flourishing. What else, Amanda, you got?
Well, I think we've ended in a really nice place. And Matthew, I love that you said there's some configurations that may not be towards that goal or that outcome that is, are you loving God better? And are you making him known more effectively, broader to another group of people who can meet our glorious Lord? So for that, I love that as a summary of markers and milestones that you can measure against. Are you sharing Jesus, and are you seeing him better through the technology you're using?
Great.
So,
all right. Well, thank you, Matthew, for being on, and thank you, Amanda, Christine. We'll see you guys later.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for your time, Matthew. Have a great day. Bye.
Bye.